Hello, 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 and welcome to the Livestream Happy Hour. My name is Eric Brayman. I am the Program Director with Lane Arts Council, and I am so excited to be able to welcome our guest today, Josh Sands. Josh, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome.
We're so excited to have you here today and to be able to learn a little bit more about the incredible art that you've been doing in public art, museum art, all the things in between that you've been doing here in our community. This Livestream Happy Hour is a part of our celebration and extension of Visual Arts Week, and Josh gets to be our very final highlighted artist as a part of that wonderful celebration of visual arts these past couple months. And we are so appreciative of you being here today, Josh. Yes, thank you. For those who are tuning in for the first time, the Livestream Happy Hour is a way for us to help artists connect with the community and for the community connect with our artists. Especially right now with the Delta variant having its heyday in this moment. It makes it really hard for us to be able to have those spaces where we can gather safely and be able to connect with one another. So we are hopeful that these virtual connections, these virtual conversations are a way for us to continue to connect, continue to make sure that our arts community can be there, right there with you as our community members and you as our community members right there with our artists. So thank you for tuning in today. I have my obligation at the very top of the happy hour to always invite you to make a contribution that is meaningful to you to an arts or civil rights organization in our community. It takes all of us coming together to keep the arts and civil rights moving and growing and making impact in our community. So any contribution you make to an organization that you care deeply about means so much to all of us in the community. Lane Arts might be one of those, but we also know there's a lot of other organizations that need that support as well. So please go make a contribution where it's meaningful for you. So that is my spiel at the top of the whole shebang. And for the rest of this, it's all about you, Josh. So I want to hear from you, from the mouth of Josh Sands himself. Tell us about yourself as an artist and creative.
All right. Well, let's see. I finished school around 2004 and was learning art and art history, anthropology. Those are kind of things that I'm interested in. And when I finished college, I moved out here to Oregon to learn how to blow glass with some friends. It was always on my radar, and I was just always fascinated by the process. So what better opportunity to move to Oregon, where it's also beautiful, compared to Wisconsin, where it's 9 months out of the year with snow. It has its own beauty, but, you know, it gets a little bit older. But anyway, it was a great opportunity to move to Oregon and learn new craft. So that's what brought me out here. And from there, it was my goal to just try to explore myself as an artist, try to learn better about what my goals were, how I can incorporate different medias into my work, because coming from a painting and drawing background, I was always interested in mixing together media and trying to come up with something fresh, unique for myself, you know, in my own perspective. So that kind of was my goal when I first moved here, to sort of bundle it all together and see if I can work glassblowing into the mix and just play around with it and experiment. And it was around that time, around 2008 or so, some friends and I, we opened a little gallery up in Portland at the Everett Station Lofts, which is an amazing place, amazing opportunity for artists. They're government subsidized small little apartments that have gallery spaces in the front of them, similar to ones we have in Eugene, but kind of on a larger scale. And so that sort of really kicked off my experience in the art scene here in Oregon. And I almost thought of it as like another course in college of learning hands-on how to run a gallery, how to, you know, be responsible, do the business side, you know, and all of that. And after 2 years, we moved on, but it taught me invaluable lessons on not just making art, but showing art and how important that is if you want to sustain your art career. And also one of the most important things is always to know your audience as well. And another side effect of that was also sort of a disillusionment that I felt of just constantly trying to sell artwork, like sell paintings off the wall. And it came to a point where I realized, wow, there's so much more than that in the world of art than there is just like having a gallery and selling paintings off the wall.
Yeah.
And for me, it was sort of, the disillusionment came with the competition that you saw amongst artists, where instead of getting along and networking and making friends, I mean, mind you, everyone has their own experiences, and my experiences weren't entirely in that direction, but just getting a sort of a sense of the competition, and that left a bad taste in my mouth. And from that point on, around 2010, when we closed the gallery, it was part of my goal to work with art and work with artists as opposed to work against them in this sort of business model, this gallery scene, this gallery world. Because I just didn't see that in my future. I didn't see selling super expensive paintings, you know, as my next step as an artist. And still to this day, I feel like in order for myself to get to that point, it would be even still yet a jump in, again, gaining audience, getting to know your people, your network. And that, it seems, unless you have that already, that could be some of the most important lessons you'll ever learn as an artist.
Yeah. I really love what you're saying there about this idea of art feeling sometimes like a competition of if you sell, then I don't, versus acknowledging that the sale of one is going to promote an energy of sale for all, or this energy of being a hub for art to be sold. And I think that's something that is sometimes confused, I think, in the arts world. And I mean, I come from a theater world also, where it is kind of like, if someone gets cast, you're not getting cast potentially. And there is this competition, but then also when we see each other thrive and succeed and celebrate each other's successes, you know, we deepen the community, we deepen the strength of that network, and opportunities come out of that network. Opportunities come out of that celebration of each other. And I remember when I first came and auditioned in Eugene, there was Melanie Mosier, who might be out there watching this someday. She turned around in her chair and she's like, "Who are you? I've never seen you before." It was so welcoming and inviting. And I remember it made me be like, I can keep coming back. This is a community that I think I can be a part of. And that energy feeds people, right? And I really love hearing how you see that also in the way that you approach your art making. Really exciting.
It's in a way super important too, in my opinion, to have that ability to develop yourself, and instead of just like chasing the next audience or chasing the next dollar. I feel like for myself personally, a lot of the artists that I admire and stuff, they maybe didn't have the fastest rise to fame, and their paintings maybe weren't selling, you know, right out of the box at the highest price point. But the way that they were able to be in the shadows for a while and get to know themselves, get their work to where they felt it was, you know, at a stronger place, it shows, I think, and it's important. And nowadays, with the internet being how it is in music, you know, a new band comes out and it's like, boom, they either catch fire or they don't. And it's like people aren't given that opportunity to grow and develop as an artist. It's all about, you know, making a big splash young and early. And for me, that's not what it's more so in music, that kind of is the model. But in visual art, I see no place for that. In fact, some of the greatest artists out there are well off into their 80s and 90s, and they've been doing it for so long, and they're just leagues above, in my opinion, you know, some of the artists who are maybe making a trendy splash or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's true for all art forms. There are brilliant folks doing like monumental things at all ages along the way. And to discredit someone for coming into their artistic career later in life even is such a disservice to the art as a whole, right? And so it's so essential that we have these diversity of perspectives across that age range. Well, I want to get in and talk a little bit about some of your art. And for those who are tuning in, please know you can use the chat to drop questions, comments, reactions, all the things. We can pull those into the conversation today with Josh. And we'll get to see a little bit of your art, I know, in just a second. But I want to, before we kind of jump into this first art share, I know that you really like to explore the concept of time. So how do you explore that in your art, and what draws you capturing these types of moments of passing time?
I'm so sad to say I have to give the boring answer to this question. That, as far as the glass was concerned, the time element was sort of not a byproduct, but it was sort of an apparatus to get to a place. For me, in being a collector, which is really one of my big loves, my main modes of working, collecting and thinking about things in that way, it was like installing the glass into a place was almost more about the place. For me, it was like collecting different spaces in photographs. So I was always interested in like trying to find the right space where that would fit. And that was like my chief motivation at that point. And the glass itself, representing water or dripping, is really sort of a reflection of a young glass artist kind of working with the medium in its more rudimentary form, more simple, because I was still learning a lot, and part of that learning in glass is also hands-on. Hand-eye coordination is really important. It's a very different medium because it's almost as if you're dancing with the medium. It has a mind of its own, and you can only meet in the middle. You can never force it. And I mean, you can if you're like a maestro or something. You have your way of forcing, but in a way, they're just nudging as well. They're not forcing. They're like suggesting very strongly. But anyway, so it's sort of like that practice of that form. It was easy kind of for a beginner to learn and work with. And then at the same time, it made for enough of an interesting object where it could be somewhat readable and whimsical. And, you know, when people see it, they can relate to it.
Yeah. Well, let's pull it up so we can see kind of what you're talking about here, some of these forms that you started practicing. Now you got a couple examples here. So tell us a little bit about this piece. How did that come to be and where was this installed?
That's a piece in Springfield. It's like I'll see a rusty pipe coming out of a building and I'll just hit a U-turn. And for a while, when I was really making a lot of glass, I would keep an orange construction vest in my car and maybe a menagerie of 10 little pieces. And if I found the right fixture on the side of a building or something and it didn't look like it was going to harm anybody too badly, I would just look over my shoulder and sit next to it for a little while as the glue dried and maybe look at my phone and pretended I was some vagrant or something until I felt like it was good to go, take a few pictures, and that's that.
Yeah. Well, I love that you mentioned whimsy being certainly one of the pieces that is inspired, and this is such a whimsical moment to look over at a building and suddenly unexpected be like, wait, what's going on? Right? But there's this beautiful liquid form, this sheen that is so calling of liquid as well, and yet it's this solid state. There's this wonderful humor to it that I see, and then also the color of it. Tell me a little bit. Was that intentional? Some of the color that you used here?
Yeah, the colors I've used have been true to, in some way, true to life. So it's always going to be a color that I haven't done like your bubblegum pink or your ridiculous orange. If I were to do an orange, I would probably make it so it like was kind of like the glass wouldn't be as glossy. I would put on the outside of the glass what they call like frit. It's little chunks of glass. So I'd melt them in halfway so it kind of looked a little pulpy. So I always with those pieces I was emulating reality. So that black is going to emulate oil.
Yeah.
And in the structure of in the sculpting of the piece, for this one in particular, I would make the oil a little bit drippier, where it looked a little more viscous and thick. Whereas if it was white and it was milk, it would be more splashy. That was kind of like part of my own little, I don't know, faux pas, not faux pas, but you know what I mean? That was part of my idiosyncrasy.
Yeah, totally. Well, there was a really great comment that came in from Felicia. She shared, I love the idea of art having a mind of its own. I often say the same about my own art. Lovely to see that others feel the same. And you were kind of talking a little bit about that, of like the glass kind of tells you a little bit what it wants you to do with it, right? Yeah. Anything you want to respond to Felicia on that?
No, I completely agree. The glass blowing is so funny. I've often said it's sort of be like trying to paint a straight line on a painting that was spinning. Or something, it's like you have to meet it halfway. You have to like use a lot of your intention and focus to kind of get to a point where it isn't fighting back with you. And that can be, everyone's different, of course, but that can be the beginning part of your career when you're like learning how to blow glass. You're definitely at the whimsy or at the mercy of that material.
Well, let's check out your next piece that you got here prepared for us. So tell us a little bit about this piece.
That one was in Eugene. It was on a typically, okay, so another thing I like to do or work with is spaces that have already been made interesting by maybe some graffiti or some being abandoned already. So I learned, actually, my early days as a skateboarder, I learned to look at skateboarding or look at the landscape as like a little bit different. You know, you're looking closely at different buildings and the little fixtures that are on them and stuff like that. So it's like if I see a tag or some graffiti, then I'll go look even closer and be like, oh, perfect. There's a pipe coming out of the side of that one. That pipe in particular would be for like a garage door or like a fence hanger or something. But the building was abandoned and in total disrepair. So that's another thing. I'm not usually trying to glue things to parts of that being in Eugene or something. It's close to home, and I don't want to tick people off. So I typically think of them as harmless. Then again, I'm sure there's some people out there that weren't thinking that at some point in time, because I've made well over a few hundred. So
yeah. Well, I hear some intention within that of finding those spaces that it won't harm, it won't be disruptive to the functionality of the pipes that you're exploring. That you're looking for those kind of pipes that have lost their purpose in some ways, and kind of repurposing them is kind of an element that I kind of hear in some of this. Yeah. Is that true?
Totally.
Yeah.
Again, it's just like sort of about the picture. I'm like, like a movie director, like, do I see it being a photograph? How does that work? Okay, that looks pretty good.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I'll just go for it too. They're not all perfect.
Yeah. Well, I love it. This one looks like it has some like ice cubes kind of pouring out of it. Is that what's going on there?
Ice cubes. Yeah. It's a little more fantastical. Just again, I guess I didn't mention it, but I do often wonder what it's like to be the viewer who just randomly stumbles across one of those things. Unfortunately, it being glass, I've gone back a few days later and they're almost always gone. I haven't really solved that issue. What I really need is like a ladder or two, maybe get to a really high point. But I wasn't risking my life quite yet.
Well, I love it. I mean, all of these pieces are public art. So I guess this gets me to one of the next questions that I've got for you before we see a little bit more of your art that'll be coming down the conversation today. So what draws you to public art and street art? A lot of the pieces the two pieces that we've seen so far, and I know we have quite a few more to see today, are those kind of forms of public installation. What pulls you over there?
Again, it's when I was feeling this sense of disillusionment with the gallery scene and the formal art scene of like the grind of trying to sell stuff, I just took it to the streets. I was like, first of all, I have this weird thing inside of me where if I make art, I want to show people. Even if it's really bad, I end up showing people. So there's this driving interest inside of me that wants to show art to an audience. That is fundamental. But that disillusionment that drove me out into the streets, I was just like, I'm just going to make pieces to brighten up someone's day or to just have fun with it so I could keep going, because I didn't have anything formal on the horizon at the time. I had just closed the gallery and I was going through this transition. I was really kind of bummed about, where my prospects were and stuff. So I just was like, I kept going. And going to make sculptures, put them out on the street. And it was enough to just keep me going and keep me going. Around that point in time, I hooked up with Mark Time, who I was DJing at the radio station, KWVA, at the university. And he had this program he was doing called the Eugene Storefront Art Project, where this was about 2010. They were helping unleashed businesses have art installations inside of them and stuff. So I volunteered working with them for a while, and I just really fell in love with the idea. And I got to see so many creative people in town and meet new people. And it just strengthened my resolve in the fact that a thriving art scene, a thriving art ecosystem has that diversity. The more diverse, it's like biodiversity in a garden. The greatest, most beautiful gardens have just the most unique and random and just a collection of all different types of plants and objects and flowers and stuff. And I started, after I broke out of my kind of academic shell, like having gone to college and putting away the dream of moving to New York City and, like chasing the big galleries. I haven't put all that away. It started to become more and more clear to me how valid all these art forms are, and how valid everyone's opinion is, and how just the thriving creativity of even that small scene at Eugene Storefront Art Project that I was seeing was just so inspiring to me at the moment. So I decided, well, I'm just going to keep going with that. I'm going to keep trying to pursue public art. I'm going to try to volunteer with the community, and that was, just kind of kept with it. It was almost an extension of street art.
Yeah. Well, I love that. Something I really deeply value about public art, street art, is that it's non-discriminatory, right? It's everyone can access it. Everyone can see it. That's not fair. Non-discriminatory might not be the right word, but it's certainly accessible for all to be able to see. There can certainly be discrimination that can exist in it, but there's something really exciting in this idea of breaking out of these formal systems and really being able to say, remind us and remember, art is for everyone. That's the purpose of art. It's about the human experience, about the human connection, and yeah. Josh,
it's subjective too. Everyone feels different things, and so maybe the angle that I approach it at is, way left field for someone but maybe they see something in someone else that they're like, wow, that inspires me, and they take up that own mantle for their own work and their own lives, and that right there, it's already been proven through. I know that recently I was reading a Harvard Health article about art and COVID-19 and its impact, and the act of making art is proven to have enormous health benefits to the maker, not to mention the community. And if that maker lives in a strong enough community where they feel free to share it and to express how they are as a person or individual, that strong community gives them an idea, gives them a sense that they can too be a part of it, and that their voice is valid, and they feel comfortable sharing, and that's just so neat to me.
Yeah. Well, and it's really exciting too. I love what you're saying. Like, everyone gets to react differently. That's one of the gifts that art offers us, is the diversity of reaction. And even just looking at the two pieces that we just saw, there's the one that's super whimsical, bright, crystal clear water with these ice cubes falling out of it. Really funny, nice humor, super refreshing, right? Like, I can see just being like, what? Oh my gosh. And then the one with oil might be like the same kind of initial reaction, but then suddenly you're like, wait a minute. There are things in these pieces, the dichotomy of this solid in a liquid form, and this idea of oil spewing out of a abandoned pipe, and there's suddenly this complexity that you get to walk away pondering, right? And what a gift to the human experience to be able to question, right? And to be able to inquire and make our own thoughts about what we just witnessed.
Right.
And they're not wrong. There's no such thing as really a wrong answer in the way that we interpret and understand art. It may be different from what the artist intended, and that's kind of one of the coolest things.
Right.
Yeah. So I love that. That's super exciting. I want to move forward, because then on the flip side of things, I guess I'm curious, with your love for public art and kind of how you've been drawn there, have you shown in museums, and what role in comparison here do you think that the museums play in the world of art?
So I sort of, again, in my own self, my own practice, I don't even know why, and I don't even particularly like it, but I started doing kind of art with a big A, art, the capital letters, and then art with a little a, where I can just goof around and have fun. And like the street art kind of came out of that. And although on the, opposite effect, that becomes one of the things that I'm more known for or whatever. But as I'm developing my academic side of my art, I'm still always trying to, I was still always trying to move into more institutional roles and academic roles, and using that art as a big A that I'm less known for, in order to, I guess, further my career, and get different opportunities. And it seems to me that in the well-roundedness, the whole scheme of my art, I'm interested in reaching as large of an audience as possible. And I'm also interested in not just the fun and whimsy, which I really appreciate, but a huge import to me is educating people and tackling tough issues, and working directly with the communities on social issues and trying to make change, physical change. And for me, the museum, at least here in Eugene, is the arbiter of that sort of power. They're the ones that can validate your artwork and make it accessible to a larger audience. And that is one of their greatest strengths, I feel like, is that validation. Luckily for us, we have Jordan Schnitzer Museum, which is, actively trying to promote local art and local scene, issues of importance. I mean, that sort of thing is immeasurable, especially to a smaller community, because they could very easily just have artworks that were flown in or part of a collection or, on rotation from other museums and galleries. But no, they're really important to me on a personal level because I've seen so many great shows there over the years that had local artists in it. And it was almost just like, yeah, if I keep trying, if I keep going, I can do that too. And so the last part of your question, how can museums, how do they function in that way? That's my simplest answer for that. They're really strong at community building. And not just for the artworks, but they also have events and all that sort of stuff. So that's a perfect model for how to, in my opinion, on how to reach a local community with like art. But at the same time, they do a really good job of curating and understanding, what level of art. It's not a level. It's more so like it's part of their duty to like. This is what I speculate. It's part of their duty to employ artists that are serious about it, and they're gonna take it, not just as a whatever. I'll finish my project at the last minute or something. It seems like they always have a intention and quality and a value to the things that they're doing.
Yeah, there gets to be more intentional design in the way that you experience the art, right? There is more of a constructed environment in which the art is able to be processed, and there is such beauty and validity in this very curated and very structured and very intentional presentation, and the incredible surprise presentation of public art, right? Like the both need to exist, because if we're only relying on public art, then it's only when you happenstance upon it, right? Versus being able to have these institutions and spaces where it can be curated in a collective thought process, because sometimes it's 20 artists who are all intentionally having pieces placed directly next to each other to make you process really complex ideas like race or white supremacy or the legacy of discrimination, or something as simple as like not as simple, something as complex as our human relationship to the environment, right? That there are these really, really big ideas that suddenly we get to kind of sit with and have a curated experience and watch multiple perspectives on the same topic be kind of shown to us. Or we get to watch an entire career of an artist be displayed in this kind of collection of pieces. I remember like multiple shows that I've seen at JSMA of like the full journey of an artist, and you walk through it and it's just, sometimes it's awe-inspiring to watch somebody's life story played out in front of you in a visual expression. And anyway, so digging it.
And I don't mean to purposefully just prop them up. I mean, even though they are a fantastic example, it is close to home and obviously, important to the community. But I think their greater legacy as well. Miss Arlene Schnitzer, she was a collector of unknown artists, local artists, Seattle, Portland, Eugene, West Coast. She was known to collect art from just the widest variety of people, and that right there is legendary to me. I mean, collecting works for their inherent value and because you like the look of them is, I don't know, it's something super special.
Yeah, and the diversity of artists that she pulled. I mean, she purchased from youth artists. Like she would go to a youth show and be like, I love this, I'm adding it to my collection. There are pieces preserved of artists at age like 13. And I think that's one of the most incredible things in that story, is that it was something that really truly was, if value was seen, it was selected, right? Exactly. And to get that kind of validation at any time in your career is really special.
What an example too to the community that, if you have a little extra money, buy local.
Yeah.
Buy from artists, I don't know. It's just so neat. But it's difficult. That's a really difficult undertaking and complex. And the museum functions in such a way that it has such an added value because it employs people that have education and background, and they're coming from a place of understanding art, so they're trying to do their best for all of that. But at the same time, I will jump right into your next question because I see it. I think there's two ways. Well, first of all, I would say that I think one downfall of having an institution of any kind is you are beholden to not just the audience, but board members and all that sort of thing. And I think the great importance of a museum can be its ability to tackle tough subjects. And if the further we move away from wanting to discuss these things, to me, that's where I see, like, I don't want to call it potential problems arising, but I feel like it could be an institution's great strength to be able to tackle some of these really hard issues. And unfortunately, the way that our society is going, people would rather not talk about tough issues in general, I generalize, than to discuss them in a public setting. Because understandably so, public art that is made for, like, sculptures out on the street, or the Percent for Art Committee, which I am a member of for the city of Eugene, the public art that we choose as a committee is not really there to function. It's not really there to tackle tough issues. I mean, it's capable of maybe lightly talking about them, but in a public setting such as, like, the Percent for Art, where our two new, we're doing a project for Campbell Community Center and Echo Hollow Pool. The art, first of all, the submissions that we get are very limited. You're mostly dealing with somebody who has a background in specifically public art, which typically speaking is like large sculptures in bronze or statues. And oftentimes they really won't be politically motivated or socially motivated or communicate really any issue at all. They're sort of neutral, and they're meant to be like that. So at the flip side, a place like a museum has this ability, and as long as it doesn't get lost, it has this ability to really be able to tackle and really touch on things that are hard. And that type of education, that type of public-facing art is the most important art that we can see right now. Mind you, on the flip side, I think the world we're living in now, some of the most important art can also just be entertaining and fun, because we need that too.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. One second. My dog decided that it wants to go out. So give me 1 second. Little tiny one. She was enjoying her crate for so long, and then she was like, gotta go. Time to go. She's like, this is getting too real for me.
This guy.
Yeah. No, that's I really love what you're saying there about, like, the ways that we can harness these kind of spaces to really have these complex and difficult conversations in a time when we don't want to talk about it, right? And to have spaces where we can not always have something forced into our conversation, right? That it can be, there is absolute richness in having a space that is about pure joy. I think about Meow Wolf and it's just, it's creative freedom and joy and play, done in such an artistically creative way. And, there's so many examples of that. That's obviously one of the biggest ones, but that's true. I think that's been talked about in all the different art circles, is like, okay, we've had a really hard time. How can we, like, hug each other when we can't hug each other? How can we, like, inspire laughter or smiles or something? Like, we don't have to sit in this muck. We can actually allow ourselves to celebrate our resilience in this moment of muckiness. Yeah. Well, I want to show one of the. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Just to keep your humanity intact.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to show one of the pieces that you have had in a museum, and I'd love for you to kind of walk us through what this piece is and where it was installed.
Here's my piece for the Black Lives Matter grant Recipient show at the George Schnitzer Museum right now. It's under high contrast light, so it's a little weird, and yeah, it's kind of a big piece when you see it in person. It's two large grocery shelves. They're 8 feet tall by about 4 feet wide, two separate ones, and it's difficult to photograph because there is a whole lot going on. So I recommend seeing it in person. But this piece tackles a tough issue of food insecurity, commonly known as food deserts, and the grocery shelf on the left, if you're looking straight at it, the white one, represents sort of an uneven access to food in areas, in communities where it's easy to find a grocery store and it's easy to have access to high quality, healthy foods. So there on the left, you'll see highlighted different holistic, natural, and ingredients and stuff that you can cook from, things that you can, that aren't just packaged and ready to go. On the right side, the other grocery shelf, the dark one, the black one, is more high processed foods, high in fat, sugars, and that sort of thing. And those are representative of kind of the opposite. If you're going to do a comparison of each side, each little space kind of will compare to the opposite side on the white and the black side. So, and it's painted black because this phenomenon of food insecurity, sadly, greatly disproportionately affects people of color and minority communities. It also affects rural communities, and it's not meant to be a representation of someone's diet, like the food that they eat. It's more meant to be a representation of the access of the food that they have. So if you're able to, if you go to a convenience store in a inner city neighborhood, these might be sort of the items that you're found with, including fast food and a lot of really unhealthy options. So that's kind of the basis for that piece. And it is a very hard, very tricky subject to tackle because it sort of mirrors back to you your, I guess I want to call it taking for granted sometimes of the food that you're able to consume, especially in our community in Eugene. We're so blessed, we're so lucky to have access to just like greatest grocery stores in close proximity, but it's important to understand everybody doesn't have that.
Yeah.
And the piece itself is more about access. And unfortunately, I've learned through this process that a piece this complex and this kind of, I guess, I don't know, politically motivated, it's easy to be misinterpreted. So I've had, unfortunately, some people misinterpret the piece in a negative way, but I push back and say, that wasn't my intention at all to say that all black people eat like this or all white people eat like that.
Right.
Because I've heard both sides of the coin. Like, well, I don't eat strictly holistic, organic, or whatever, and all white people don't eat like that, and that is 100% true. They definitely do not. But it is not about the choices that you make to eat. It's about the ability to come to those choices. And stepping back from the piece, the greater understanding here is that both this entire issue of food insecurity is, again, disproportionate to where you live, unfortunately, but also disproportionate to your education level. And baked into this is this idea that if we can understand how inequities and inequalities in nutrition and health affect our community, or not just our community, but the world in general, then we'll have a more educated and a more sympathetic view, and we'll be able to help too, because along with my research into this project, I put together a compendium, or an appendix of ways to help, organizations to donate to, and the research that I had done around this subject. So it's a very complex, very tough issue, but I feel very proud, and I'm, again, super thankful to the museum for including me in the Black Lives Matter show.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you're sharing there of like acknowledging the complexities and we were talking about earlier how different people interpret different things differently. And one of the things that I see in this that, as somebody who is coming from a space of privilege, is this is something that sometimes requires us to sit with what privileges do we hold? Right. And how does that differ? And, it doesn't mean that, like you said, explicitly, all people in each of these categories are all these things. That's of course, nothing is ever absolute in that way. But to start thinking about what do I have access to and what do I have choice in, versus in what areas or communities is there not that choice, is something that requires us to look at our own privilege and acknowledge it. Mm-hmm. And that's a really difficult process to go through. Even if you were raised in a space that may be different from where we currently live today, that doesn't mean that you haven't still been founded these opportunities and these resources and these privileges. And so, anyways, I deeply appreciate it, and I totally understand the complexities that exist there and how it can be interpreted. And what a great opportunity to have that dialogue around, this is something that was thought out. This was something that took time, that took intention, and the steps. And I really appreciate you talking through that and kind of sharing some of those pieces.
So here you see me kind of using all of my skills: painting, glass blowing, photography, installation, networking, because I borrowed those shelves from the Friendly Street Market. Oh my God, all to them. Go to the Friendly Street Market and spend all your money. I borrowed them from them, and they are very, very expensive shelves. Mm-hmm. The grant money I received wouldn't even cover a near fraction of buying those shelves from scratch. So you see me putting all of my skills and work together to make that come together.
Amazing. Well, I want to check. I think we have a second picture of this, another piece. Do you want to maybe just give like a real quick synopsis of kind of what this one looks like?
This was at the Eugene Contemporary Art space, anti-aesthetic. Eugene Contemporary Art has been around since around 2010, I think, doing great work in the contemporary art field, which is slightly different than you would have your like naturalistic landscape painters. And, contemporary art is more, like I said, tackling issues and that sort of thing. Not necessarily, but coming from more of a conceptual, artistic leaning. So the piece was installed there, and it was part of a critical conversation, which was curated by Kathleen Caprario at the gallery, and it was a look at race again. And this piece itself examines how white skin and white faces are privileged to be seen almost, again, disproportionately in public. So included in there, it's meant to be set up like a small science library, or like in a library itself, sort of an interactive exhibit. But since COVID happened, this was around November of last year, since COVID was kind of going off and we weren't allowed to be sharing, it just had to be kind of a monument to that idea. But built into the library, or into the shelving unit, is a photo album of 300 photos that I took, just completely casually at grocery stores, at other stores around town. Anytime I saw a person depicted on an advertisement or a product, I would take a photograph of it. And if there was a person, almost 9 times out of 10, they were white. So this piece reflects that. So it's like a collection of those sort of things, and then mixed into it a few other nods to privilege that we as white-skinned people enjoy. So like, we all got a good laugh out of my camping sign, because we all decided that camping was one of the whitest things we could think of, one of the most privileged things we could think of, where you leave your beautiful home to go into nature and live without. Now, mind you, I love camping, and it's a lot of this is sort of tongue-in-cheek. I'm perfectly willing to laugh at myself and everything else. So it was more so just a mirror of that privilege and that idea.
Yeah, awesome. It's really fantastic, and this kind of assemblage kind of work that you do here is really exciting. And I think whenever I see pieces like this, the most exciting thing is you can come and look at pieces like this 20 times, and you'll discover something new that is tucked in there the 20th time you get there. And again, another great piece that really forces us especially who hold that privilege and that power, to have to look back at ourselves and say, look at how much I am afforded, and how little, how different that is for others in this community, in our community, and who are a part of our culture, and how often we are prioritized in order for others to be overlooked. And it kind of is that order of things. And so I just really deeply appreciate that lens of holding a mirror up, really, in so many ways, especially to white attendees, to have to grapple with that.
So it was hard, and not my most popular work. I got a lot of people that didn't like it, but again, I was just, as any anthropologist or ethnographer would do, I was just sort of experimenting with this idea. Like, if I find people represented in products or places in stores, are they going to be, what color skin are they going to have? I would just photograph them, and lo and behold, a few days later, I had 300 photographs, and maybe 5 of them were of people of color, and they were on hot sauce bottles or barbecue, and so you can see the hidden racism that is afforded that.
Yeah.
But this piece elicited the funniest reactions. Some people said, "Oh, I didn't even think that was part of the show." I'm like, "Yes, I love that." And then other people said, "Oh, it felt so inviting, almost like Grandma's den." And I'm like, "Yup, see, there's something to that." Like, things are changing right now very rapidly, and it's great to see. And, and then the last funniest one was, somebody said, when I looked closer, it felt like Get Out, that movie, the horror movie by Jordan Peele. And it was like, whoa, when I looked closer, I realized all the people were white. It was so crazy. It was almost creepy. I said, all right, I feel good about that.
I love it. Well, thank you for sharing these with us, Josh. Really, really awesome, powerful works. We have had another question that came in that I want to be able to get to. This is coming in all the way from Green Bay. So Joey Joe Bear from Green Bay asked, first memory, what is your first art feeling / experience? Maybe what was one of your first memories of having an art reaction, is what I kind of see in that question.
My most memorable experience was visiting the Louvre in Paris, and just the opportunity to see the ancient Egyptian art and, the Venus de Milo. And it just, that right there already told me 2 things: that I was interested in art, but I was interested in the wide world of art, archaeology and history. And I was, I think, 13 when I had visited, and it was just, there was just not, for me, nothing like it. And I was going, down a path where I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And then since then, in high school, I pursued art, and I was good at it. It was one of the only things I was really exceptional in. So after high school and then into college, I went into painting and drawing, and it just made sense ever since that experience at the museum.
Amazing. I love that. Well, I want to be conscious of time, and I know that we've got more art of yours to be able to share. So I do want to pull up just a couple more pieces for you to be able to talk through kind of what you created here and some of the intentions that you had with them. So we've got some more public art pieces right here. So tell us a little bit about this piece. This was a part of something here in Eugene, right?
Yep. So after my time at Eugene Storefront Art Project, and a few years later, I ended up coming on board with the Whitaker Community Art Team, who is a subgroup, a subcommittee of the Whitaker Community Council, and working with the community on different art pieces. And, just, anyways, found that so fulfilling and stuck with it. Anywho, this piece was with the city of Eugene for their bridge exhibitions program. That Lillian Almeida and Carrie, shoot, her last name's blanking me. Anywho, anyway, Eugene, the city of Eugene. A lot of these things start by just sitting down and applying, and thinking through your thoughts and writing up the most succinct ideas you can surrounding a subject. And, so I recommend to anybody that is interested in these sort of processes to just apply and to put your best foot forward, because that's how that's how I've seen it done. That's how I've gotten it done, is just applying. So there's no magic to that part of it. But anywho, the bridge program was, I think it was 5 artists the first year, and they were all public art.
Mm-hmm.
This piece was installed in the breezeway off of Willamette, and it tackles the issue of gentrification. So what we see on the far end is a nest type area that is built up of like sticks and twigs and completely natural wood objects from forest and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
That nest breaks through to a middle area that is sort of changing, and all these products in the middle are like halfway turning into industrial or construction products. So they're like, some of it was hand planed wood and more raw wood materials mixing in with that natural twigs and sticks and that sort of element. And then by the final, which you don't see here, out on the end in the last few feet of the project, is where the project starts to become built out, and all of the raw wood products start to turn into more finished wood products, sanded, painted, stained, and they sort of live in conglomeration together to resemble sort of a city, but also with that fast movement that sort of also resembles progress. And it's meant to question, especially working with the Whitaker, with people in the Whitaker, it's meant to question this idea of not only gentrification but displacement, and the way that the natural environment, and not just the natural environment in terms of the forest or fauna, but natural environment in terms of the people that have been there, and how that starts to change over time, and not necessarily for the best. But it also, in the name of progress, eventually it becomes somewhat necessary. And in order to help a neighborhood thrive and survive, businesses come into that neighborhood over time. And it's just it was sort of a reflection of that, however loosely or conceptual the idea is sort of a reflection of that idea that the community itself will, act as like a boat on the river, but the river itself is always going to be changing.
Yeah, really powerful. And this was a part of Visual Arts Week actually a few years ago. That was part of kind of the perfect tie back to this wonderful connection that brought you onto the happy hour.
Oh, it was so lovely. We had performance artists at the Halt Center. They were amazing. They sort of ran the gamut of all different types and varieties of art. So it was really exciting.
Yeah, really, it was a really incredible collection of pieces. Well, let's look at one more, and we'll see if we can kind of get through this piece, which is another one of your public art pieces. Tell me a little bit about what's going on here.
Here we see Val, my partner in crime at the time. She's taking a rest. This was 2016 or 17, and there were what was called the free walls. There was a set of freestanding walls that people could paint democratically on, and they happened to be on private property. So the people who owned the property were like, well, we're going to tear them down and toss them. And they had gotten a hold of Val, who was working with Dubcat at the time, the Whitaker Community Art Team, and let her know, would you guys have any interest in it? And she right away saw the value in it and the cultural value of not only retaining the walls for the community, but also what could be for the future. So she sort of started off, and with other help, my friend Dane and a few of us had, we were working with Dubcat. We excavated the walls and used the broken parts and the refuse part of it to raise new money to build new walls, which is still in progress, but we're making strides, and we will have new walls with the city of Eugene. So that was one of the huge hurdles to overcome. Was we could have probably had it done by now on public property, or on private property, but we felt it very important to do it on public property with the city of Eugene, so that it could have more of a community impact. And so having, a lot of this work is sitting down with parks people and sitting down with people at the city, and just kind of, working through contracts and working with contractors. And the past 2 years, or since COVID has been a thing, has really slowed us down quite a bit, because prices of things have gone up. So we've had to raise more money finding reliable contractors and having some fall through last minute, that kind of thing. So it's been a struggle, but the good news is we are looking terrific to get this project done this year. I don't want to make any like sound promises, but it's looking really good.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's such a fantastic thing to be able to save, and what a legacy that you and your team will be able to leave with our community for artists today and in the future, right? That's really fantastic.
Yeah, it's so important.
Yeah. Well, I want to be conscious of time. This time flies so much when you're having great conversation. So I want to make sure that I can ask you, we heard a little bit just now about some of the projects that's in the works with the free walls, but what other projects do you have in the works, and what things can we look forward to maybe seeing from you and your collaborators in the days ahead?
We have another we have a few projects going right now, and I'm just going to touch on the social stuff with the community art team because we have a little time here. Another project we have that is almost finished. In fact, really has only a few hours left of work to physically put into it, is for the Reflections program with the city. We're also one of those projects, and we created one of those red English phone booths for people to call. There's a number that we host, or that we're paying to have hosted, where you can call in and reflect on your experiences over the past 2 years with the pandemic and how you've coped and dealt. And our goal is to then compile a lot of that information together and, make it into a comprehensive art project where there's video and audio, and the piece itself is moved to different locations so that we can encompass a wider range, a wider audience of people who are just willing to share and reflect on their time over the past year. So we feel it's a very, very, very important project. We also are working on a few COVID-19 outreach projects, inspiring vaccine confidence and inspiring just using other examples and other models. We saw Carrie Mae Weems do her billboard and her project. So along those lines, we're having an opportunity to commission artists for their designs to help us create traffic signs and yard signs, and I believe a few more electrical boxes, because part of our work that we really, really love and enjoy at Dubcat is to be able to pay other artists to do things. So in the past, we've commissioned artists to paint the traffic boxes around town, most specifically in the Whitaker, and to paint murals and all sorts of stuff like that. So we have a few of those projects in the works right now, and we're always really, really excited to see the submissions. And that for me is the most fulfilling part of my socially engaged work, is getting to help other artists out and, handing them checks. It's just
amazing. Well, thank you for all the incredible work that you are doing for our community, have been doing for our community. And I know that phone booth Reflections project is going to be such a powerful space for folks to be able to just go and process. And I know that that's inspired. There's a really cool story around that. So once that does come out, I know, please, folks who are listening, go read a little bit more about where the inspiration for this piece came from. It's a really powerful story from Japan, right? Is kind of where some of the origin came from.
They had done a project similar, and that's kind of where a little inspiration came from.
Yeah, and just such a powerful way for us to be able to each in our own ways process and reflect on the things that have been happening, but in a space that is so connected to others. And there's something really dynamic in that setup that I'm really excited for our community to experience. So thank you for all that you've been doing for us, and you have been. Any final thoughts or kind of plugs you want to share before we jump off today?
Not really.
There's more to learn if you follow Josh on the social medias and on his website to stay caught up with all those things. Does that sound good?
Keep making your art with a little A. That's what I would say. You never know where it's going to take you.
Well, Whitaker Community, this feels like the perfect little kind of shout out to finish off. The Whitaker Community Council said, great conversation. Thanks, Jesse, on Lane Arts Council. Thank you, Whitaker Community Council, and everyone who's been here today. Like Josh said, couldn't say it any better. Keep making your little A art, and we will see you being creative on the on the other side, whether it's the next day or the next week that we see each other. So thank you all, and we'll see you again very soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Adios.